Hey guys, in today's video we're going to be reviewing the Bigtreetech Manta, and this control board was interesting to me because lately I'm trying to get one of my last machines set up with Klipper, and the shortage of Raspberry Pis has been a problem. It seems that Bigtreetech has come up with a solution, and what they've done here is they've created a board, the Manta M5P, and they have other variations of this that can take advantage of either a CM4 Raspberry Pi or their own version of a Raspberry Pi, which is the CB1. In this box, I have the TMC2209s, the drivers for the board. The whole package was $88.69, and that's shipped. So anyway, let's jump into it, and we'll see what's in the boxes. Configure it. I'm going to try to hook it up just to load the Klipper onto it and figure out how to get it working before I take apart one of the printers to do it. Guys, if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing, turn on your notification bell, and leave me some comments. I love reading the comments and do my best to get back to you guys as soon as I see them. All right, so let's start with the board. So this is the Manta 5P. All right, pretty cool. It looks like they got the kit comes with all of the board connectors and crimp terminals. Get a little rubber ducky. Some jumpers. Got the Manta sticker. USB-C cable to USB. And then we have the board. Now the printer that I'm going to be installing it in is going to be the Corception 300. It's a Core XY printer. And the printer has a lot of potential. Unfortunately, it's held back by its lousy electronics. But the form factor is the right form factor for speed. Anyway, check out the this little area right here. So this is the spot that accepts the CB1. And the way I'm going to install this, it doesn't matter if these ports don't line up with the original holes because it's going to be all internal anyway. I don't plan to use any of these external ports. So let me get this thing on the box. We'll look at the other stuff. Yeah, something pretty interesting too is it has the ports down here for the display. So if you're going to use the Raspberry Pi or the CB1 to hook up the webcam and the display, the connections are down here, along with the micro SD. And very important, you have the standard GPIO pins. So this is the same format that comes on the Raspberry Pi. That means that connecting an accelerometer should be a piece of cake. All right, let's look at the TMC 2209s. And so here are the drivers. It looks like they got little VREF pots on them as well. And they also come with some heat sinks. All right, awesome. And then lastly, the CB1, another rubber duck. And the CB1 comes with an antenna. So this is to give you a little bit more Wi-Fi range. which is good because it's going to be underneath the Corception 300, which has kind of like a metal lid on the chassis. And this thing uses, to get the Klipper software on here, it uses a little bit of a different method to formatting the SD card and getting everything working. All that is found on the Bigtreetech website, and we'll go through that process in this video. All right, so to install this thing is relatively simple. You just come over here to the board. It kind of shows you the layouts. So what you're going to do is you're going to take it. You're going to orient it the way they tell you. And then if you look, when you look at the back side, you got these connector strips. You guys can close here so you can see. So you got these connector strips offset. They're also offset on the underneath part of the card. So you're going to put the offset side, match it up with the one on the board. I'm going to turn it upside down so it's easier to see. And all you're going to do is you're going to just lightly place it on there, and you can feel when it lines up with the pins. So like right there, it's lined up with the pins, and you need you got to put a good amount of pressure to seat this thing. I can already tell. Yeah, you got to push it down pretty good. You don't want the fiberglass to crack or anything, but you do need to put some pressure down to get it to seat. All right, very good. I'm just going to double check one more time. Okay, perfect. Okay, so for this build, I plan to use these 2209s in UART mode. That way I'm not having to jack around with messing with voltages and stuff on the little actual drivers, but I can do it all using software and Klipper. So that's what we're going to be doing. And to install these jumpers, the way that it's going to go, get you guys in close here so you can see. All right, so we're going to be I'm going to be bridging these two together on each of these. So these two, this two. So let me slide one in and I'll show you how they got to be configured. All right, so I'm just grabbing a set of tweezers and they're going to go like this. So just like that. They're going to go right here. They're going to bridge these two together. All right, another super cool thing here is you have fan voltage control. So there's 3 jumpers here. One is labeled, this bottom one is labeled fan 0. This top one is labeled fan 1. And the one all the way on the top is just regular fan. So fan 1, fan 0. And you can select either jumping these 2 pins together, the first 2 pins, that'll be 24 volts. Jump the middle pins together to get use a 12 volt fan, or the last 2 pins together for 5 volts. And I'll put a diagram up on the screen showing the connections. That way you guys can see this more clearly. I know it's kind of hard to see because the board is black and the pins all look the same, but all right, so let me put the jumpers in here, and I'm going to wire it according to the stock fans for now. And if I decide to change later on to Noctuas, I can just simply move the jumper over. So that's nice because you don't need to use buck converters. So for 24 volts, you select this first set of pins. Put the jumper in there. Okay, so that's one. Second one. See the jumpers there? There's one here and one here. And then the last one. Okay. So they're the jumpers. Maybe you can see them better from this angle. All right. So 1, 2, 3. All right. And then the fans are labeled. So if you look real close, you got just fan. You got the Pi fan. So the Pi fan is 5 volts, and I believe it gets the 5 volts from either the Raspberry Pi or the Raspberry Pi side of the board. But the ones that you're influencing is the regular fan, fan 0, and fan 1. Okay, so let's go to the next step. All right, so I installed the antenna for the CB1, and this thing just pushes right on, and there's like a little round port for it. You just push it on there. I also installed the 2 thermistors. That way when we boot this thing for the first time and we start playing around with Klipper, it can see these thermistors and it doesn't give us any errors. We're going to need to install a couple of jumpers. So the first thing that we got to do here is we need to enable this voltage USB. So it's right here. It's the text is upside down, but it's VUSB. And what we got to do is bridge these two together. So I'm just going to get one of these little jumpers and install it here. Just like that. Okay. So it's right next to this little HDMI plug. All right. Next thing we have to do is we need to determine what voltage our drivers are going to use. And there's 2 ways that you can configure this thing. So here at the very top here, there's three little pins on each driver. And what we want to use is we want to use the 2 right side pins. So we're going to bridge these together. And what this does is it uses whatever voltage we have coming in on the DC input, which is these 2 ports right here. So this is going to be the main power for the board. So since we're using a 24 volt power supply, what happens is we're going to get 24 volts by bridging these 2 pins, here to this driver. Let's say, for example, you have a big giant stepper motors that use 48 volts, like you're running a CNC machine or something. Then what you could do is you can bridge these 2 pins over here, and what determines what voltage gets to these 2 pins is what voltage is delivered to this HV or high voltage input. Okay, so in this case, since we're not using high voltage input for stepper motors, we're going to be using these 2 pins over here, which in the documentation is labeled as VBB. So VBB will be whatever voltage is the input voltage for the board. All right, so I've already got them installed on these other drivers here, and I'm going to install the last one so you guys can see how it goes. And so all you're doing is you're bridging these 2 pins on the right side, just like that. Okay, and if you forget what they are, you can always turn the board over. And on the back side of the board, it'll say VBB, VM5, which means the voltage to the driver. So whatever side you bridge will determine what the middle pin gets. So if you bridge high voltage, you got to make sure you have a voltage input on the high voltage side, and that will give power to this middle pin. If you're going to use the board voltage, then you bridge these 2 over here. And remember, and the board is, since it's upside down, it's going to be backwards. So when we flip it over, it's going to be the right side set of pins on each driver is going to be what's bridged together. All right, so these are the TMC2209s. We're just going to get these guys out. And the reason that I have 5 of them is because I have dual lead screws on the Core XY printer that I'm using. And I need to independently control the end stops. So I got 2 end stops for the Z axis, which is kind of a nightmare. Alright, so if you look at these, they're color coded. You have the red side and you have a black side. All you need to do is match up the red side with the red side. So if you see, here's the red side here. Zoom in here so you guys can see what I'm doing. And all I'm going to do is get these pins on the edge here, and then just rotate it over and line it up with the black pins. Okay, so just like that, and just push it down. And I'm going to try not to push on the pot. So I'm pushing on the board. I'm not pushing on this little pot. And I'm going to do the same for all the other ones. And sometimes the pins are like a little bit bent, so you have to kind of work this thing to get it on there. But you could check the profile to make sure that they're all in their little places there. And then just push them down. All right, and the way that these go, so this is another thing that I was kind of confused about, is what what this min 1, min 2, min 3, and min 4 is. These are the end stops. Okay, so there's 2 ways to trigger this. You can trigger using the 5-volt on the bottom, and then it would trigger this middle pin here, or you can trigger using ground, which is how we're going to do it. And okay, so the order of the steppers, if you notice, this is not boards that Creality uses. They don't label them X, Y, Z, and extruder. They label them as motor 1, motor 2, motor 3, motor 4, motor 5, because this one has five stepper drivers. So in this case, I want to use all the ones that have accessibility to an end stop. So the order is it's X, Y, Z, and then this is extruder 1, or the extra extruder. So if you have a dual extruder machine, this could be an extra extruder, or this can also be another axis. So for example, if you have a dual lead screw, like I have in my case, this now, instead of being stepper Z, it's going to be stepper Z1. And then this final one, since it doesn't have a end stop port, this is going to be dedicated only for the extruder. Let's get these heat sinks on here. And all you do is just peel off the little tape and make sure you're not touching any of these pins. And just put the little heatsink down. Alright, that looks good. Alright, so we're ready to go there. Alright, let me jump on the computer. I'll show you guys that diagram real quick, and then we'll go ahead and get the software installed on this. Alright guys, so in this set of slides here, it's just going to be kind of a quick overview about the jumpers that we just installed on the board. In addition to that, you got PIO pin configuration, and I'll leave a link to this file in the video description. That way you guys can use it as a guide. So there's 3 choices that you have for the fan voltages. You got 24 volts, and if you're going to use 24-volt fans, you're going to use the jumpers on the left here indicated on the diagram. If you decide you want to use 12-volt fans, you select the ones in the middle. And if you want to use 5-volt fans, you use the ones on the right. And you can have you can mix match them. You can have a 5-volt in one fan slot, you can have a 12-volt in another, and a 24-volt in another. So it's up to you how you want to configure the fans. This board gives you a lot of flexibility to do just that. Next thing is to set up the TMC2209s. That's what we're going to be using in this installation. And I want these things to be completely adjustable via software. I don't want to mess around with pots or any of that stuff. I want to be able to change everything. And to do that, we got to set them up in UART mode. And the indicated jumpers are what needs to be set up using the little jumpers supplied with the board. Next jumpers would be the voltage for the drivers. And as we already reviewed, VBB is going to use the input voltage of the board. So in our case, it's going to be 24-volt power supply, so it's going to be 24-volt input. And since we're using the VBB jumper, the drivers are going to get 24 volts. If you're using this board for a big CNC machine that uses 48-volt stepper motors, then you would use this this jumper configuration. The indicated spot on the bottom would be your voltage input. So that'll be, it could be any voltage, 12, 24, 48. I believe 48 is the max voltage that you can use there. And then, so if you give 48 volts to this input, the stepper drivers are going to get 48 volts. In this slide, you got all the jumpers that we're going to be using and how I have them currently configured. The only additional one is this VUSB, which I mentioned earlier. And this is going to be in temporarily until we configure the software on the CB1. Once that's complete, we can remove this jumper and then we can power the whole system using the 24-volt power supply. And lastly is going to be these this min. So these min ports here, I was kind of confused by this. I didn't understand what these were, but these are essentially the limit switches. Pin is actually the very top pin on each one of these. And then the middle pin is the ground. And then the bottom pin would be 5 volts. So if you wanted to trigger this using voltage, you could trigger it using voltage, or you can trigger it using ground. I'm going to trigger it using ground because I feel that that's a little bit safer. So I'll be using the 2 pins, the first one and the following one, when I make up my connectors, and I'm going to leave the last port empty. So there's not going to have a wire or a connector there. And I'm going to do this for these first 4 drivers. The last driver, if you notice, does not have a min port at all because the last one is a dedicated extruder driver only. The one before it can be either a secondary extruder or it can also be used as a secondary stepper driver for like a dual Z setup. So that's how I'm going to use it. So in my case, it's going to be labeled Z1. Now that we got this complete, let's head over to the Bigtreetech GitHub page. And what you can do is you can just do a search for Bigtreetech. Using Google or whatever search engine you use. And you have 2 choices. You can go to the Bigtreetech products site, or what we need is the Bigtreetech GitHub. So we're going to click on that. And up here, you're going to search for the board that we're going to use. In our case, we're going to be using a CB1 along with the M5P, which we already reviewed. So we're going to search here for the CB1. And here we have the Bigtreetech CB1, and it says OS system image. This is what we want. And then we're going to scroll down to where it says OS image, and we want the latest image. Click on that. And the latest one is version 2.3.2. We're going to click on that. We're going to scroll down, and there's two different ones that you can pick up. I'm going to pick up the larger one. This is the one that I used, and it worked just fine for me. So I'm not sure what this other one is, if it's a more compact image or what the deal is with it. But we're going to go with, oh, I see what the difference is. Okay. So if you want a minimal install image, you would use this 310 megabyte one that ends in a XZ. If you want the full image, you would select this first one, which is the 1 gigabyte image ending also in XZ. So that's the one that I'm going to download. And I've already downloaded it. It takes a little while to get. So I already have it here. And to install it, we're going to be using the Raspberry Pi Imager. To get that, you can type in Raspberry Pi. And we want the Raspberry Pi Imager, so raspberrypi.com. We want software. And you want to download the imager. So just select the appropriate operating system. In my case, it's going to be Windows, but it's also available for Mac OS and Ubuntu. I already have it installed, so I'm not going to install it again. I'm just going to open it up here. And then what you want to do next is you want to scroll all the way down to the very bottom, and you're going to have a choice that says Use Custom. That's the one that you want. Click on that. And then you're going to go to wherever it is you downloaded your image file to. I have it here. I'm going to select it. Click Open. Next thing you're going to select is the storage device that you're going to put it on. So for me, I'm going to be using this USB card. So it's a micro SD. And it's this one here on the bottom. So I'm going to select it. And you don't have to do anything with the cog wheel. You can leave this all blank. You don't need to do anything here because the image works a little bit different than the standard Raspberry Pi image. Once you have these two things selected, select Write. It's going to prompt you that it's going to erase and format the SD card. Select Yes. And this. All right, guys, while this is going, I'm going to show you another thing that you should look at. So you want to look here, you want to go back to the GitHub, and you want to go to the board. So if you're using a M5P like I am in this example, you would just select it. So you can go over here just to the main thing, select motherboards. This is a Manta series, and I'm going to be using an M5P. And here you have all the information on this board. And to be honest, it's a little bit overwhelming when you look at it like this because they just give you all kinds of information, and it's very cluttered and kind of difficult to understand. But they do provide the pinouts, and this part here is helpful when you're dealing with Klipper and you're going to be working with the printer.cfg file because it does give you all the pin assignments here. But it can be a little bit confusing when you're looking at it like this. Nice thing is if you go down to hardware configuration, they break things down and they give you all the specific steps. So the first thing you need to do here is set up your VUSB jumper. That way you can install the software onto the CB1. Next thing is to determine what stepper drivers you're going to be using, and they give you the models here and they tell you exactly how to configure it. In our case, we're using the TMC 2209s, and we want to use them in UART mode, and that's exactly how this configuration is, and this is exactly what we just went through in the previous segment. If you're going to be doing SPI mode, there's settings for that. And then if you're going to be using the sensorless homing, you would set these jumpers up as well. and that will give you the ability to eliminate all of your limit switches, which is kind of cool if you have a Core XY machine like a Voron or a Corception 300 that doesn't have a whole lot of space on the print head for a bed probe. You could set it up to use sensorless homing. And as we also talked about, we talked about the voltage selection. So you have two modes that you could pick: HV for high voltage and VBB, which uses the voltage that's supplied to the main board. The board will accept either a CM4, which is the standard Raspberry Pi. It can be plugged into the socket on the board, or you can use the CB1. And as we discussed before, you got the voltage for the fans: 12 volt, 24, and 5 volt. By default, it's set up to use 100K NTC. So you don't need to add a jumper here, you just leave these open. They also give you the BL Touch wiring along with the port that it needs to use. And then it gives you all the different options for the different screens that you're going to install on it. We're not going to be using a screen because we're going to be running this thing completely off a laptop using Klipper, so there's no need to add a display. It also has a couple of ports for RGB lighting. If you guys want to add RGB lighting to your printer setup, it's got a couple of ports just for that. You also have the filament sensor, 3 ports for that, and it looks like what they're using here for the filament sensor is one of the end stops. So I won't be able to use the filament sensor, at least not in this standard way, because I'm using this end stop for a different purpose. And then here you have the GPIO pin diagram. And what I would do is I would download this and then rotate the image around so that you can see the lettering in the right way. And then on the underside of the board, you have the ribbon connectors for the camera for the CB1 or Raspberry Pi CM4, along with a mini display. And then I'm not sure what this contraption is here, this closed loop PNP, I'm not sure what this is. And then you have the software installation. And this is for the CM4. But if you're using the CB1, you would use their image. So we already went through this, so I'm not going to go through this again. See if they give us any other information here. All right, so here's another place where you can get the downloads for the CB1. These are different releases, and then here's a link also to the Raspberry Pi imager, along with some instructions here. Okay, one last thing before we install it on the CB1 is we got to come in here and we got to make some changes. So over here in system.cfg, we're going to right click on it and we're going to edit with Notepad++. If you guys don't have Notepad++, just do a Google search for it and download it. And in here, what we're going to need to do is we're going to have to set up our network. So you want to put your Wi-Fi name, your SSID name, and your password. So that will be in this field right here. And then you're going to put your password in this field over here. And once you got all that stuff in there, save it. Another thing we're going to need to open is this board env.txt. So right click on that, open it also with Notepad++. And in here we're going to need to make a change as well. Since okay, let's see here, what are we going to be doing? We're going to be using this thing in UART mode. So we're going to need to change this console equals display to console equals serial. I'm just going to paste that in there. And let's see if we got to change anything else. No, everything else looks okay. So if you guys get the CB1 that has the eMMC memory built into it, you're going to replace this info down here for this line over here. So you would just copy this and paste it in this section right here. Okay, but we're not going to do that. So it's the default is for the SD version. So just click save. And then let's head over to the Raspberry Pi or CB1. The SD card goes with the label facing up. And just slide it in there. And you're going to need a minimum of 2.5 amp 5-volt power supply. And what I did is I wired it up to a USB-C cable that I had. And I'm just going to plug it into the board and then plug it into the outlet. And this thing is going to take a few minutes to expand the file system. You can tell when it's done because this you'll have like a little activity light here that'll start blinking like a steady green. We'll just give this thing a few minutes and then we'll check on the computer to see if it shows up on our Wi-Fi. One super cool thing about this configuration is that you don't need any cables going from the CB1 over to the board, and you don't need to flash the board with any software from the CB1. It works. So that's kind of neat. All right, you see that green light blinking? All right, so now we should be able to find it using the computer. So let's jump over to the computer real quick, and I'll show you guys how to find it. All right, what we're going to do next is we're going to use this piece of software here, and I'll leave a link to this in the video description. So it's a program called Wireless Network Watcher, and what this is going to do is it's going to scan my network. And find the device that we're looking for. Okay, so here it is right here. So let's, you can do it one of two ways. You can use the IP address, or you can use this btt-cb1.lan. So let's go ahead and type that in. Press enter. Okay, and you are gonna have some errors and stuff on this. But what we're gonna do before we do anything, we're gonna come over here to the machine wrench. And we're going to refresh this update manager, and this could take a few minutes. Once it completes, you're going to get probably a connection failed. Just go ahead and click on try again. All right, it's telling us that our update is done. Go ahead and close it. It's going to reboot. All right, so now we're all up to date, but we still have some errors. All right, so let's take a look at what this says here. It says that we need so we got to add the printer.cfg. So let's go over here to config, select config examples, and we're going to look for the main board. You can click down here on the bottom and select all so that it shows you everything. And what we're looking for is the Bigtreetech Manta 5 config. So here it is right here. So I'm going to click on it. And actually what I could do is probably just open it. Okay, so I'm just going to open it. And I'm going to select everything that's in here. So I'm going to go all the way down to the bottom. I'm going to highlight it. Grab everything all the way up to the top. I'm going to Control C to copy it, or you can right click to copy it. And then exit out of this. Then you're going to click this down arrow again. You're going to go back to the config folder. And in here, we're going to open printer.cfg. And right now, what it's trying to do is it's trying to point to a file. And you could just bring the file over, and then it will find and then replace the name of the file that's in here with the name of the actual file. But I don't want to do it that way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete these 2 lines. Add 1 more line, and then I'm going to Control V to paste, and that's going to put everything that I just copied in there. And then I'm going to move this Mainsail line down, so I'm going to right click, cut. I'm going to click over here at the beginning of line 3, and I'm going to backspace twice. I'm going to come to the end of where it says parameters period. I'm going to press enter twice, and I'm going to Control V or right click paste. And now we should be good to go. All right. Okay, so let's do a couple of other things here. One thing that I want to do is I want to add the stepper Z1, which is going to be our second lead screw stepper driver. So I'm going to find it down here, and if you look here, it says extruder 1. So I'm going to select this line here, right click, I'm going to cut it, I'm going to backspace twice, and I'm going to come over here to stepper Z, to where it says 200. I'm going to enter twice, Control V to paste, and I'm going to change the name of this from extruder 1 to stepper underscore Z1. Get rid of this hashtag here. Get rid of this next hashtag. Get rid of the next one. Okay, and then I'm going to remove this hashtag with these 3 periods, and then backspace 1 time. And another thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add the rest of these parts here. So if you notice, it's got micro step and it's got the rotation distance. So I'm going to copy that from here. Copy. And I'm going to put it right underneath the enable pin. Enter. Control V to paste. And let me see what else. Okay, so we don't need don't believe we, oh, actually we might need this. So we're going to need this end stop pin. So I'm going to enter here. But the pin number is going to be different than this one. So I'm just going to copy this one for now. And paste it in here. And let's go over to the documentation of the control board. I'm going to click on motherboards, Manta M5P. to scroll down here to where I get the information about the pins. Okay, so we're going to be using this end stop pin port here. So this is going to be min 4, so we need PC2. So PC2 is our end stop pin. So we're going to come back over here, change this to PC2. Another thing we're going to need to do is, since we're going to be using UART, we're going to copy these one at a time. And I'm going to go ahead and rename this one right now to, so this one is going to be, okay, so extruder 1. So here's the one that we need. So extruder is the standard extruder. It's the one that doesn't have an end stop port. So we're going to leave this one alone. But this one that says extruder 1, we're going to change this. So we're going to change this to stepper underscore Z1. We're also going to change the run current from 0.6 to 0.8. Okay, and then now I'm going to copy these one at a time and put them underneath the stepper that they belong to. So I'm going to cut it from here, come over here to stepper Z1, select the last line here, press enter twice, control V, paste it in there, and I'm going to do the same with all of them. So I'm going to come back, I'm going to grab the extruder one, right click, cut, come back up here to where it says extruder. I'm going to go to this last line of extruder, enter twice, control V. Next is going to be stepper Z. I'm going to do the same thing here. Right click, cut. Stepper Z right here. I'm going to come to the end, enter twice, control V. Next is stepper Y. Control V. And then lastly, stepper X, cut. And then I'm going to come back. And I'm not going to be using 2130s. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of everything up here, along with this TMC2209 configuration, because we've already moved them. Backspace twice, again, one more time. So I always like to leave one space in between each of these different sections. And we'll leave these alone for now because we don't have the BL Touch installed yet on this printer. Heater fan, pin PA3. Main fan is PA4. Okay, now I'm going to enable these. So I'm going to start with this top one here. I'll remove these hashtags. All right, and let's see what else we got here. Okay, so it looks like we had, based on the message that we previously looked at, it looks like we have an MCU problem here. So what I'm going to do for this is we're going to use a PuTTY. So I'm going to log into PuTTY here. And the host name is Bigtreetech-CB1. Click open. You're going to get this pop-up. Click yes. And the login name is BIQU. So BIQU. Enter. And then the password is also BIQU. Enter. And then you're going to get this screen. All right. So now the next thing is we're going to need an ls command. So I have this in my Klipper documentation. And this is my flashing guide for the Ender 3v2. But this is also available in the Klipper website. So if you go in there under documentation, you'll find this line here. So I'm just going to Control-C to copy it. Come back to PuTTY. I'm going to right-click, press Enter. And then it's going to give me this value here. Okay, so I'm going to select this value. Right-click. Actually, just maybe you can just do Control-C. Control-C. Yeah, let's try that. All right, Control-C. Let's come back over here. And let's paste it underneath here just to see if it's different. And yes, it is different. Okay, so it looks like the information here that changed is this middle section here. So that looks like what's different. But just to be sure, I'm going to grab all of this. And I'm going to cut it. And I'm just going to highlight this up to this first slash mark. And I'm going to Control-V to paste it. And then we should be good. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and save and restart. And that's it. Okay, so we're good. It looks like we're good to go. All right, so we have, we don't have any errors here. Let's go to our dashboard. And here are our two thermistors that we have temporarily plugged into the board. And we don't have this yet connected to a machine, so I'm not going to try to home anything because there's no stepper motors connected and we don't have a power supply connected to it yet. But that's it, guys. So this thing is ready to go. All we need to do next is wire it up inside the printer, connect all the cables, and then try to see if we can get some movements and verify that all the directions are moving in the right way. So for that, I'll create an upcoming video. So stay tuned for that. Guys, if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing. Turn on your notification bell and leave some comments. I love the comments and do my best to get back to you guys as soon as I see them. If you enjoyed this video, give me a thumbs up. Alright guys, this video is a wrap. Until next time, take care.